The training base was already alive before sunrise. Rows of soldiers moved with discipline, their boots striking the ground in steady rhythm. Commands echoed across the open field, sharp and precise. Among the many young faces in uniform were Emily Carter and Jason Miller, two newly assigned Army soldiers beginning their first major field exercise together. Emily Carter stood tall in formation, her posture perfect. She had earned a reputation for being disciplined, focused, and deeply committed to military rules. She believed that success came from preparation, structure, and respect for orders. Every detail mattered to her, no matter how small. Jason Miller stood a few rows away. He was confident, alert, and known for his fast decision-making. Jason trusted his instincts and believed that adaptability was the key to survival in unpredictable situations. While his instructors admired his courage, some felt he sometimes relied too much on his own judgment. Though Emily and Jason were both dedicated soldiers, their approaches to duty were very different. Their unit had been assigned to a multi-day training mission designed to test leadership, teamwork, and communication. The objective was to secure a designated area, manage resources, and respond to simulated challenges under pressure. It was meant to prepare them for real-world responsibilities. Emily had been placed in charge of planning and coordination. Her role required organizing schedules, tracking supplies, and ensuring every procedure followed protocol. Jason was assigned as a field leader, responsible for making quick decisions during movement and drills. At first, the mission progressed smoothly. On the first day, Emily briefed the unit carefully. She reviewed maps, explained assignments, and emphasized the importance of following the plan. Jason listened, arms crossed, nodding occasionally. He respected her knowledge, even if he felt some steps were unnecessary. The tension began on the second day. While leading a patrol exercise, Jason noticed that part of the terrain was more difficult to navigate than expected. He decided to slightly alter the route to keep the team moving efficiently. The adjustment worked well in the moment, and the patrol completed its task on time. However, when Emily reviewed the patrol report later, she immediately noticed the deviation. "You changed the route," she said, keeping her tone calm but firm. "Yes," Jason replied. "The original path slowed us down. I adjusted it." "That wasn't your call to make without reporting it," Emily said. "We agreed on the plan." Jason frowned. The plan didn't match the situation on the ground. Emily took a breath. In the Army, coordination matters. One change affects everyone. Jason didn't argue further, but the disagreement lingered between them. As the day continued, their interactions became strained. Emily questioned Jason's updates more closely. Jason felt restricted by what he saw as unnecessary rules. Other soldiers sensed the tension, and the atmosphere grew uncomfortable. That evening, during a group review, the disagreement surfaced again. Emily pointed out inconsistencies in movement timing. Jason explained his reasoning openly. Neither raised their voice, but the clash was clear. The commanding officer listened carefully. After dismissing the unit, the commanding officer spoke to them separately. The officer called Emily into the office first. She entered with her usual composure, standing at attention until told to sit. The officer observed her for a moment before speaking. "Carter, you've shown excellent organizational skills during this mission," the officer began. "Your attention to detail and commitment to protocol are exactly what we need in coordinators." "Thank you, sir," Emily replied. However, the officer continued, leaning forward slightly, "I need you to understand something important about leadership in the field. Plans are essential, they provide structure, prevent chaos, and ensure everyone knows their role. But plans are also guides, not absolute laws." Emily listened intently, her expression serious. In real combat situations, the terrain changes. Weather shifts. Enemy movements are unpredictable. Intelligence can be wrong or outdated, the officer explained. A leader who cannot adapt when the situation demands it puts the entire mission, and lives, at risk. Emily nodded slowly, processing the words. Discipline is essential, the officer said, his tone firm but understanding. But so is flexibility. The best leaders know when to hold the line and when to adjust. They trust their people to make sound decisions in the moment, especially when those people are trained soldiers acting in good faith. I understand, sir, Emily said quietly. I was so focused on maintaining order that I didn't consider Miller might have valid reasons for his decisions. Exactly, the officer replied. Miller should have communicated better, yes. But you also need to create an environment where your team feels they can adapt without fear of rigid criticism. Leadership includes reading situations, and reading people. Emily left the office with much to think about. She had always believed that following the rules was the path to success. Now she understood that leadership required something more nuanced: judgment, trust, and the wisdom to know when flexibility served the mission better than rigidity. After Emily departed, the officer called Jason in next. Jason entered with his characteristic confidence, but he could sense the seriousness of the conversation ahead. He stood at attention. Miller, sit down, the officer said. Jason took his seat, meeting the officer's gaze directly. You showed good instincts during yesterday's patrol, the officer began. Your adjustment to the route was tactically sound, and your team completed the objective efficiently. That kind of quick thinking is valuable in the field. Jason felt a brief sense of validation, but he could tell there was more coming. However, the officer continued, his tone becoming more pointed, initiative without communication is dangerous. Do you understand why? Sir, I believed the situation required immediate action, Jason replied. That may be true, the officer said. But you don't operate alone, Miller. You're part of a unit. Every decision you make has ripple effects on others. When you changed that route without informing Carter, you disrupted her ability to coordinate the rest of the mission effectively. Jason shifted slightly in his chair, beginning to see the broader picture. What if another team had been scheduled to use that original path for resupply? The officer asked. What if Carter had planned for your team to rendezvous with another unit at a specific location along that route? What if there had been simulated hazards placed on your new path that you weren't aware of? The questions landed heavily. Jason hadn't considered those possibilities. In combat, a small miscommunication can lead to friendly fire incidents, missed rendezvous points, supply failures, or worse, the officer continued. Your instincts are sharp, and your courage is commendable. But courage without coordination isn't leadership, it's recklessness. Jason absorbed the words seriously. I understand, sir. I should have reported the change immediately. Yes, you should have, the officer agreed. But this isn't just about reporting. It's about mindset. You need to see yourself as part of something larger. Your decisions affect others. Your actions have consequences beyond your immediate team. Teamwork and communication aren't restrictions on your ability to act, they're what make effective action possible in the first place. The officer's expression softened slightly. You have real potential, Miller. But the best soldiers learn to balance their instincts with discipline. They act decisively when needed, but they also stay connected to their team. That's what separates good soldiers from great ones. Jason nodded, genuinely reflective now. I'll do better, sir. I know you will, the officer said. You and Carter both have strengths this unit needs. The question is whether you can learn to work together instead of against each other. Both soldiers left those conversations thoughtful and quiet. Emily walked slowly back to the barracks, replaying the officer's words in her mind. She had been so certain that Jason was being careless, but now she wondered if she had been too rigid. Maybe there was room for both structure and adaptation. Jason sat alone outside for a while, looking out over the training grounds. He had always prided himself on his independence and quick thinking. But the officer was right, he wasn't alone out here. His choices mattered to more people than just himself. That night, neither of them spoke to each other, but both were thinking about the same thing: how to be better tomorrow than they were today. The lessons were beginning to take root. The next morning brought a new challenge. The unit was informed of a surprise simulation involving limited communication and time pressure. Radios would be restricted, and leaders would have to rely on coordination and trust. Emily and Jason were assigned to oversee different teams that needed to work together. The exercise was designed to be chaotic, exactly the kind of situation where poor communication could lead to failure. As the exercise began, confusion quickly spread. Messages were delayed. Movements needed adjustment. The pressure was real. Emily's team was positioned on the eastern flank, responsible for securing a supply checkpoint. Jason's team was on the western approach, tasked with clearing a path for movement. Both objectives needed to be completed simultaneously for the mission to succeed. But the limited radio contact made coordination nearly impossible. Jason could see that his team was moving faster than anticipated. The terrain was clearer than the map suggested, and they were ahead of schedule. His instinct was to push forward immediately and capitalize on the momentum. Emily, on the other hand, was dealing with an unexpected obstacle. One of her soldiers had reported uneven ground near the checkpoint that wasn't marked on the planning documents. She needed to verify everyone's exact location before proceeding safely. The clock was ticking. Jason wanted to act immediately. Emily wanted to verify positions before proceeding. Through the limited radio connection, Jason's voice crackled through. "Carter, we're ready to move. We need to advance now while we have the advantage." Emily hesitated, looking at her incomplete position report. Every instinct told her to wait, to confirm, to be certain. But she also remembered the officer's words: flexibility is part of leadership. "Miller, stand by," she responded. "I need confirmation on all positions first." Jason felt the familiar frustration rising. They were wasting valuable time. But then he remembered, your decisions affect others. You don't operate alone. They met briefly near the command point, both breathing hard from the rapid movement across the field. "We don't have much time," Jason said, his tone urgent but not confrontational. "I need 30 seconds to confirm everyone's location," Emily replied, her voice steady but open. Jason looked at her, then at his team waiting in position. He could push forward on his own. But what if Emily's concern was valid? What if moving too soon put someone at risk? He took a breath. "Okay," Jason said, nodding. "I'll prepare my team to move on your signal." That moment marked a change. Emily quickly confirmed the positions with her team, her movements efficient and focused. She appreciated that Jason had trusted her judgment instead of acting alone. Within 25 seconds, she had what she needed. "All positions verified," Emily radioed. "Miller, you're clear to advance. My team will secure the checkpoint simultaneously." "Copy that," Jason responded. "Moving now." Instead of arguing, they worked together. Emily relayed clear instructions once she confirmed the details. Jason executed the plan quickly and efficiently, adapting his approach to match the timing Emily had established. Their teams moved in sync, supporting each other. Jason's team cleared the western approach with speed and precision. Emily's team secured the checkpoint without incident, having avoided the unmarked hazard she'd identified. When both objectives were completed, they converged at the rally point exactly as planned. The exercise ended successfully. Other soldiers noticed the difference immediately. The tension that had marked the previous days was gone, replaced by smooth cooperation. Commands were clear. Responses were swift. The entire unit functioned like a well-oiled machine. When the simulation concluded, the instructors gathered to review the performance. The commanding officer addressed the unit, his expression satisfied. That was excellent work under pressure. Coordination, adaptation, and trust, exactly what we needed to see. He paused, then looked directly at Emily and Jason. I want to specifically note the improved teamwork between Carter and Miller. That's the kind of leadership this army needs. Emily and Jason exchanged a brief glance, not triumphant, but quietly respectful. They had both made a choice in that critical moment. Emily had chosen to trust Jason's urgency rather than insisting on perfect information. Jason had chosen to wait and support Emily's process rather than acting independently. And it had worked. Later that day, as the soldiers rested after the intense exercise, Jason approached Emily where she sat reviewing the mission reports. He hesitated for a moment, then sat down beside her. You were right about communication, he said, his voice sincere. Things worked better when we stayed aligned. I could have caused real problems if I just pushed ahead without waiting. Emily looked up from her notes and nodded. And you were right about adapting. Sometimes plans need adjusting. If I'd been too rigid back there, we might have missed the window entirely. They shared a brief, respectful understanding, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement that something had shifted between them. I think we both learned something, Emily added quietly. Yeah, Jason agreed. We did. Over the next few days, their working relationship improved steadily. The change wasn't dramatic or sudden, but it was real and consistent. Emily became more open to Jason's input during planning sessions. She would ask for his perspective on how routes might work in practice, and she built flexibility into her schedules to account for field adjustments. She still valued structure and protocol, but now she saw them as foundations to build on, not walls to hide behind. Jason made sure to keep Emily informed before making changes. When he spotted potential issues during exercises, he would radio in immediately, explaining his observations and asking for guidance. He still trusted his instincts, but now he understood that communicating them made those instincts more effective, not less. Their strengths balanced each other. When Emily's careful planning identified a supply shortage before it became critical, Jason praised her attention to detail in front of the unit. When Jason's quick thinking helped the team navigate an unexpected obstacle during a night exercise, Emily made sure the commanding officer knew about his decisive action. The unit benefited from their cooperation. Other soldiers noticed the change and felt more confident in their leadership. The atmosphere became more positive, more cohesive. Teams worked together more smoothly because their leaders were setting an example of mutual respect and collaboration. By the end of the training mission, both soldiers had learned valuable lessons that would stay with them throughout their military careers. Emily learned that leadership includes flexibility, that the best plans leave room for human judgment, and that trusting her team's abilities in the moment didn't mean abandoning discipline. She understood now that structure was meant to support success, not guarantee it through rigidity alone. Jason learned that discipline and coordination are not limitations but protections, that communicating with his team and following established protocols didn't restrict his ability to act decisively. Instead, it made his decisions more effective because they were part of a coordinated effort rather than isolated actions. On the final day, as the unit stood in formation for the closing ceremony, the commanding officer addressed them one last time. Being a soldier isn't just about strength or speed, he said, his voice carrying across the field. It's not just about following orders or making quick decisions. It's about trust, respect, and working together, even when you disagree, even when you see things differently. The officer's gaze swept across the rows of young soldiers. Some of you will lead through careful planning. Others will lead through bold action. But the best leaders learn to do both. They learn from each other. They recognize that different approaches can complement rather than contradict. And most importantly, they put the mission and their team above their own pride. Emily and Jason stood at attention, understanding the words more deeply than they would have just a week earlier. You've all grown during this training, the officer continued. But growth doesn't stop here. Every mission, every challenge, every conflict you face is an opportunity to become better soldiers and better leaders. Take these lessons forward with you. As the formation was dismissed, soldiers dispersed across the base, some celebrating the completion of the training, others already preparing for their next assignments. Emily and Jason walked together for a moment, their footsteps in sync. "Next assignment, wherever it is," Jason said, "I'm glad we figured this out now." "Me too," Emily replied. "We're better soldiers for it." They were still different. Emily would always value structure and planning. Jason would always trust his instincts and adaptability. They still had strong opinions, and they would likely disagree again in the future. But they now shared mutual respect, and that made all the difference. Life lesson. As young soldiers continuing their journey in service, Emily and Jason carried forward more than just training and experience. They carried the understanding that conflict, when handled with discipline and respect, can shape stronger leaders. Their story teaches us several enduring truths. Different approaches can coexist and strengthen each other. Emily's structured planning and Jason's adaptive instincts weren't opposing forces, they were complementary strengths that made their unit more effective when combined. Communication transforms potential conflict into cooperation. The breakthrough came not when either one changed who they were, but when they learned to communicate openly and trust each other's judgment. True leadership requires both discipline and flexibility. Success in any challenging environment, military, professional, or personal, demands the wisdom to know when to follow the plan and when to adapt to new realities. Mutual respect is earned through humility and growth. Both soldiers had to set aside pride, listen to guidance, and acknowledge their own limitations before they could appreciate each other's strengths. Working together doesn't mean thinking alike. The most effective teams aren't made up of people who always agree, but of people who respect each other enough to navigate disagreement constructively. While their clash had tested them, it ultimately strengthened not only their partnership, but their commitment to duty. The lesson extends beyond the military. In any team, organization, or relationship, differences don't have to be divisive. When approached with respect, open communication, and a shared commitment to something larger than ourselves, those differences can become our greatest strength. Emily and Jason learned that being right matters less than being effective, and being effective requires working together, even when the path forward isn't always clear. That is the mark of true leadership.